I have retired my media and I'm about to open. Oops, that one. Oh yeah, you can see that there. So I get Astral. Okay, we call it Astral now.
And
Astral.
character is ruined and retired.
Ugh, that sounds terrible. But you know what? We're gonna ride with it. So Astral is my next character. Know very little about it apart from the miniature, which during the actual last session that we actually played, you and I sort of had a bit of a gander. I couldn't contain myself, and it was just the mini, and it kind of gives me something to plan until leading up to our actual unboxing, right? And I'm probably more excited about this. And guys, I'm showing my actual other camera at the
Yeah,
moment,
I
but
know.
you remember this. I'm more excited for this. It's up there with Shackles in terms of the miniature. I actually really, really, really love this miniature with the
Mm.
giant, I don't know, great sword, and it looks two-handed, and she's got one leg, and there's another one hiding behind. You know, all that kind of good
Yeah,
stuff. I'm just expecting
'cause
some
you
Highlander
yeah, 'cause
thing.
you hated the snowflake one.
Yes, the miniature, yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it was horrendous.
Yeah.
All the other ones are actually pretty good. It's just that one and Shackles definitely my faves. All right, so I'm opening it up.
Mm.
That's not a knife. This is a knife.
That's
Just an
it.
Australian
That's
thing. Yep, you got to throw
yeah.
that one in there.
You're supposed to use a spoon.
Knifey spoony.
Mhm.
All right, let's see what we have. We have an infuser. Is that all it is? Orchid infuser. Orchid. When was the last orchid we had?
I don't know.
Have we had
Was
one?
were you the orchid? Isn't the shackles an orchid?
Aster.
Oh.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't know if we've had one.
yeah, I don't know.
Aren't they usually spelled? We've had a lot of Savas, and I think
Yeah.
or
I don't know. Is
one.
the Death Walker an orchid?
Ooh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Or Bone Shaper.
No.
Oh no, Bone Shaper's an Aster as well. Um, I don't know. So it's an Aster. And then the very first things I'm looking at, we've got an 11 card limit. So yes, we're jumping back up to +1, which is great. Which means there's going to be elements to this that makes me still burn more cards, basically,
You'd
to
assume
keep
so.
me up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Never comfortable. Ultimately. We got medium health again. So we haven't had any of those kind of tiny health guys in a while, which has been refreshing.
Is that Drifter Health?
This is my drifter health,
Okay, so not Drifter
not
Health.
traditionally drifter health. No, this
Yeah.
is medium
Okay.
health.
Mhm.
And I'll just quickly check the back before I check the front. So we got complexity 3.
Mhm.
Oh my god, have you seen the elements?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Uh, there, there's 3, although there's an overlap, and I'm not going to explain where, but just obviously I'm trying to minimize the spoilers for other classes, but there's an
Yeah.
overlap there, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I think. Yeah. No. No. That is. There's a little overlap. Yeah.
And speaking of which, I'm slightly more ranged than that character.
Oh, just only tiny. Yeah. Like so, you have one range card. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
Cool. Some more melee.
Melee, mobility, support, defense, control. That's a lot of
A lot of
spread.
control. Yeah. That's a lot of control and a lot of defense.
Yeah. So
Mm.
she probably is tanky.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Cool.
right.
Cool.
Do you want to read this out on the class notes, because I love the way you did it for the last one that we did.
The the special rules on the
Yeah,
front of the
yeah,
card.
yeah. The class notes, yeah.
You have powerful actions known as infusions, which have a little green symbol, which typically require the consumption of multiple elements to perform. Okay, so you're
Oh,
going to need to be generating multiple elements. Cool.
which is why there are 3. Tired.
Okay. They have
Oh,
both a persistent bonus and an ability which you may perform each time any infusion action is performed, potentially yielding a chain reaction when you have multiple active infusions. These extra abilities can be performed in any order when triggered.
right.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like you're going to have persistence out with infusion abilities. So the card will have a
Oh.
persistent ability, and also if you fuse X, like have these elements, then you'll be able to perform that ability as well. Something along those lines. I'm sure it'll explain
Yeah.
it if you read more.
Which is why on the example it's got Boon of the Tempest, it's got that symbol. So that's the infusion symbol that I'm looking for. So if I have this one out and I play a different one when this is out, so this looks like a persistent. So when this is or
Yeah.
another thing is played, but just perform an attack 3.
Yeah.
Then I can
Okay.
choose
Cool.
the
Wow.
order.
Yep. Yeah. Well, so it sounds like if there's extra abilities triggered, then you get to pick the order, which will be cool, right? So that also that it clears up a whole bunch of the questions we always have about what order do these things happen in, and we just go, oh, we'll just make it up. So yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, Many of your abilities allow you to reduce their power in exchange for infusing elements. These exchanges are optional. Any action with mandatory element consumptions can only be performed if the elements are consumed. Okay.
Right.
So, for example, that says move 4, -1 movement to eat wind. Optional power reduction.
Why?
I was thinking the same thing. I'm sure it'll make sense when we see the card.
Okay.
Reduce the power in exchange for infusing elements. Oh, wait, that's creating.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
spending. Sorry,
Okay,
okay, so
okay, okay.
-1 to move to
Yeah.
create. Okay, so you have the optional ability
To
because these
make
symbols are
them.
important, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you're gonna have the ability to,
Slightly
make
nerf
your
myself to infuse the
but
elements that I
generate.
may
Yeah, yeah,
need.
yeah.
Yeah.
So these exchanges are optional. Any action with the mandatory element consumptions can only be performed if the elements are consumed. Yeah, okay, sweet. Cool. That
Yeah.
makes sense. All right, so you
Alright.
can kind of go the other way in regards to elements, where it's always like if you do this, you have to consume. You've now got the option of like doing a thing to generate. We
Right.
call it generate. I think that's why the words got a bit weird. But yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
okay. So the word because the game calls it infuse, right?
Uh,
Infusing and consuming, I
okay,
believe.
so our generate is actually called infusing. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, I believe
Okay,
so.
all right.
And
And
this
you've
is
got
an
powerful modes,
infuser.
infusions. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm glad that you used
Yeah.
the same word twice. Yep. Let's see how it
Already,
goes.
yeah, just quickly, already on this, it's cool because obviously, anyone that can infuse multiple elements is really handy for a party, provided the party can make use of those elements.
That's very true. That's very true. So just to read, because I just had a look at the very first card, and it says powerful actions on infusions, which typically require consumption of multiple elements to perform. Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. So
So that's the
those
thing at the
ones.
top left of the example.
Yeah, okay. So is the first card you've got there Boon of Tempest?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I think that's the one on the example as well. So that's kind of, I guess, showing us what it's all about. So yeah, I'll let you take it away as you read through. All right. So, hey, everyone. You may notice that we are looking a little bit different, slightly older, and potentially wearing different clothes. Now, this is because we got to the end of reading the cards and realized that and when I say we, I mean I, made some pretty big errors when it comes to how the character work, and that influenced how we talked about the cards. I don't think our evaluation was incorrect, but it is going to be a bit weird when you go through and we keep making these comments about how the infusions and et cetera work through. So what we decided to do to make sure that we still capture our like really high energy for it, we've kind of kept our unboxing component, but we are going to re-record what we do when we look at the cards because then we can evaluate them with how the actual rules work.
Yeah.
So and I take full responsibility for this, okay? Because we rewatched the recordings, and Detty was like, "Oh, maybe it works like this." I was like, "No, I don't think so," and then proceeded to be wrong for the next 45 minutes. So that's my bad. I'm humbled from that. So I will, in the future, just shut up and accept that I don't know what I'm talking about. In saying that as well, we have actually Detty has actually played one. Oh wait, do we want to talk
Yeah,
about that?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We
I
also
won't be
just
able
want
to
to say
not.
yeah, true, true. So I also just want to talk about that Detty has played one scenario with this because we unboxed it, recorded it, played one scenario, realized again that it was all kind of a bit backwards. He's figured it out now, so he's an expert with the class now. So he'll be able to
So
give
good.
not brand new thoughts on it, but our expert level opinions about how to nail this class.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really good to kind of see that through the lens, these cards through that lens. So
Yeah. All right. So yeah, everything that Gaz said is correct. Okay. So
thanks
so
for backing me up there, mate.
that's
Appreciate
all
it.
good. So yeah, we'll go through the cards like we would do normally, but with a bit more accuracy and also some thoughts because yes, I some cards I would have read back then, even though we got the idea behind them right. On further inspection in the game, I realized the card didn't quite work the way I had in my head from this. So this will be a different take, and I'm sure it'll still be interesting. But we'll start off
Definitely.
with you're good.
No, yeah,
We
yeah, all good. Let's go.
with our Boon of the Tempest, all right, goes on initiative 28, which is not bad. I'm okay with that kind of. This is the interesting thing about the whole infuser thing is that you've got the infuser cost for the infusion up the top left-hand corner. These cards, there are several of them, and they require 2 elements most of the time. And one of them is a specific element, and the other is usually any other element. And that's the cost to play the card. So that's what we're looking at the top. That's just to play it. And then the middle section of the card, it says when you perform this, and that symbol is infusion, or another one is played, you get to perform that ability. And this is a persistent that sits in front of you once you've played it, and you trigger it when you play it, and you trigger it whenever you play another one. And the ordering is up to you ultimately. So that's kind of how that one works there. Now, just above that, there's a separate box, which, looks like it's connected to everything, but it looks like its own thing. That is a permanent persistence that will be for the rest of the scenario whilst you still have it in front of you. So in Boon of the Tempest, you're getting +1 to your movement and jump to all of your move abilities just from playing this. And anytime I play another one, I will be able to perform the infusion on that card and also do an attack 3 from this one. So that's essentially kind of how they're working in a nutshell.
Which is really interesting, right? Because we've got characters and we've seen them that have persistent abilities, but I don't think we've ever seen a character with a persistent that has a cost, right? Like an infusion cost. It's always a play, prep round 1 usually doesn't require anything.
No.
So it's interesting because +1 and just, looking at this one, +1 movement and jump to all your move abilities is pretty powerful. But at the same point, it definitely means that it's hard to play turn 1, like really hard to play to turn 1.
I have learned
And
this.
yeah, well, I mean, I imagine that as you go through, like having one element up when you want it is actually sometimes a bit of a juggle, but having 2 makes these permanent buffs kind of, the value is great early, but it's going to take kind of, a
Trying to get them
puzzle.
out is
Mm,
quite tricky. So the bottom of Boon of the Tempest is a move 4. Which obviously if you have this card with you, move 4 is great. We love move 4. Underneath that, we've got that new infusion penalty where you can actually -1 to that movement to create air. And we've learned from this character, it's all about the elements and having the right elements up the right time, which means you're probably going to spend a lot of time going, you know what, I'd love to move 4, but I can make move 3 work because I really need the wind
yeah.
or the air, right, for a following turn. So that's a snapshot of kind of how a infusion card is kind of looking at the moment. We'll move over to Bounty of the Earth. So this is another infusion card, but this one's on the bottom. And I will just start with the top. It's a shield 2, which is really, really nice. I did have this card with me, but I really want Earth to go up, which means it's a shield 1 and an XP. And this is kind of where the mind ticks throughout any given scenario where it's kind of like, oh, that sounds like the cards seem great until you go, but I really need the element, which makes them not so good. Because then this literally is just shield 1. Like it's a shield 1 with Earth and an XP, which is actually pretty good now that I think about it for a level 1 card. But it kind of, it's a feel bad man, and it's a mind situation because you have to factor in that negative.
Yeah. That's it. Just on that, it's really interesting how you evaluate that, right? Because I didn't see the XP, which it kind of is another little incentive to take 1 less shield, take a bit more damage, but get the earth. If a character had a card that just said 1 shield, create leaf, gain 1 XP, you would probably evaluate that as pretty meh, right? You'd be like, oh, it's not a super early card, so it's not going to guarantee I go before everything. Not like a sub 10. 1 shield isn't that exciting on 1 turn, right? 1 permanent shield can be, but having to, on a top,
On
you're
a
not
top.
attacking,
It's the top
right?
that's probably the
Yeah,
tricky part.
that's it. Like if it was bottom, then you can kind of go, oh, if I'm in the right place, I can do it. But having a top, so I'm missing out on my attack, and I'm only getting
Mm.
1 shield. But when you do summarize it and you put it into the context of this, it's like, oh yeah, I'll take a little bit more damage to make leaf because I can use that. Suddenly, it's like, oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, and this is the infuser. This is the Astral headache that I'm now being introduced to. 23, yeah, like you said, it's better, definitely. It's your version of that other card, which is really cool, from another character. And then the infusion, this time it's Earth and another element. This will give you permanent retaliate 1 at range 2, which is really nice. I've yet to try it. Tried very hard to, but yes, I want to see what this looks like to get out. But that's a whole other thing that I'm planning for an Astral Diary. And then when this infusion is played or another one is also played, you can perform heal 3 self.
Mm.
And the cool thing about these infusions also is just like most other, I guess, summoning classes, like pet classes, they generate XP as a just from having it out. Whereas a lot of the classes I've had recently that had any kind of persistent that went out, it's more about token moving that gives me the XP. So this is a nice, easy way of just going, fat XP, fat XP, fat XP.
Mm. It's funny within our group we've got this. It's now Detty's experiencing it. It's like called Retaliate Life, where when you play a turn or you try to get the monsters to hit you, they pull their shield and retaliate. They pull their heal card. They go before you. They move away. They push you away. Like everything about them that would be normally they'd just be hammering into the person standing there. As soon as you put up Retaliate, they're just like, oh, don't want to borrow that.
No, but then you have to metagame it and just say, hey, do you guys want them to not attack us? I'll put my retaliate up. So there you go. It's a
Yeah.
win-win then. Caress the Night, 87, nice and late. We have a infusion now with Dark and anything else. Add wound and muddle to all your melee attacks, which is very good if you are obviously taking a more aggressive and offensive approach. And then when this infusion or another one is played, you perform Strengthen Self, which, of course, when you use Strengthen on your own turn, on yourself, you end up with 2 rounds of Strengthen, which is pretty cool, although this is a top. But if you compare it with a bottom infusion, like we just did with Bounty of the Earth, then you're going to get Strengthened for this, and you could play a top attack in the same turn, which is pretty cool. The bottom is the attack 3, and then you can nerf it to make Dark to an attack 2 and an XP. So you start to see a pattern. With these basic 3 cards, it's giving you a range of different ideas of how the infusions kind of work, because you've got 3 very different types with different element usages. And then you've got 3 fairly basic actions tied to them, all very different, that give you an idea of, you can make them less effective to create those elements that you may be needing on a future turn.
What I think is really interesting is the timing of all that. Because again, we look at persistence and we usually think you want them out as early as possible. And I think with these, you kind of do to get more value out. But because they all have like a on playability essentially, right? The usefulness of those is going to vary because the turn you play Caress of the Night, it's probably pretty hard to do an attack unless you've got a bottom attack, right? Unless you've got the top of Boon of Tempest up and then you're getting a free attack with it, which means that'll be with advantage. So it's kind of not wasting it. But that means you would have had to play Boon of the Tempest first, which again is an attack, which means you're going to want to play that when you're next to something.
Correct.
Right? The same with Bounty of the Earth. You're going to want to be missing health before you play that so that you aren't again wasting the first trigger of it. So it's all very fascinating around not just having the elements, but also timing it where you can maximize it because you're probably only getting what 3 or 4 at most of these infusions out.
Mm.
So missing one of those triggers is potentially a pretty big deal,
It's a big
right?
loss. This is something I've put together, like I said, a bit of a diary based on what I've learned from the first scenario to the second one and any tidbits that I picked up along the way, which I think is going to be interesting when I string it all together into, an overall experience. And well, the first page is already really long because of all the things that I have learned from that one scenario that I played. But what you were saying regarding timing, 100%. It's just another layer of forward thinking, I guess,
Mm.
because yes, you want to be able to get that attack off, strengthen, heal, whatever. There's another one further down the line, which is the disarm. If I'm not next to something, it's a waste.
Yeah. Well, what you need is just some really good teammates, right? That all want to carry items that help you create elements on their turn. So when it gets to your turn, you're like, oh, thanks for that. That was great.
Yeah,
Really appreciate that.
we did discuss that, absolutely. We have Emerald Edge. Emerald Edge is the first of another type of card that we have that actually has a mandatory double element consumption that in order to actually use the card itself. So in this case, Earth and Dark. Uh, if you get those off, you get an attack 5, you get Ward Self, and an XP, which is great. It's not a lost card, it's just expensive from an element point of view. The thing is, though, once you've kind of met the infusion criteria to get your infusions down, the elements, while still obviously important, become less important for trying to save up for those infusions, and you can start using them for cards like this, which is very handy because that's for a level 1 card. If you take away that cost, it's pretty good. Like
Bonkers,
it's
right?
really good. And then of course, you want to time that after you've got your strengthen and etc. etc. 70 initiatives, it's all right. It's pretty crap actually, but it's I've seen worse. The bottom is a heal to target to range to. You can nerf this to only target one person, and I'll be honest, it's most likely going to be yourself. And you can create Earth. Earth is really important, I've learned. I have been looking into Earth cards. So this is a really good one to have. And I didn't use it like a crazy amount for the top, but you do recall that I did actually spend I think 2 turns actually getting that top off, and it was really quite nice.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think I love the flexibility of the bottom of that though, right? Like there is a time when you can see throwing that out to maybe get rid of 2 poisons or maybe a bane or some wounds or whatever. Like being able to spread that out a bit is the option. Because again, if that just read heal oneself, create grass, it's substantially like again less flexible than a heal 2, target 2, range 2, with all those options. So I think it's cool that you're going to have this utility
Yeah.
to be like, no, 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 I can solve this problem. And I think some of the later cards as well, also hopefully have a bit more flexibility for you, so it's not as rigid.
Yeah. It's that the elemental, it's I'll discuss it at another time, but the headache is definitely real.
Mm.
We have Formless Bladestorm, so this is a nice offensive card. It's attack 3, pierce 2. And then it's a positional one where, you have to stand in that spot and you get a nice little attack that hits 3 hexes, basically in a line from where you're standing. You get to teleport to any unoccupied hex that is adjacent to the furthest enemy targeted by the attack. And it creates either air or dark as a burn card with 1 XP. I have not used this or tried this. I can see how it would work. It seems pretty self-explanatory, and it's really cool that it's got a teleport attack attached to an attack, especially with Pierce. It looks like it can do some really cool stuff, especially if you've got your Strengthen up, if you've got Caress of the Night up to be able to muddle all those targets and also wound them at the same time. Some cool stuff there. It's just not something I've kind of gone into at the moment. 33 initiative, it's all right. Move 2 down the bottom and a pull to range 3. And of course, you can use that to a pull 1, range 2 to create air.
So the burn component, because this is the first burn card we've seen that's not a infusion, right? It's really interesting where these sit in for characters who have I'll say mandatory persistence, but are going to be playing persistence because they're kind of core to the class. And we've
Yeah.
seen a variety of these that that you have to get them out early or at least some point, because otherwise you're just not getting the kind of full benefits. How you kind of evaluate that? Like it kind of irrelevant of whether you played it or not, but just that idea of these cards and what they need to achieve to be worthwhile.
I think that is it's a very situational card, obviously, because you want to line things up properly for it, and it's obviously very, very good if you're up against things with high shield and low health, things like flame demons and living spirits and things like that. I think it's fine because the bottom is infinitely spammable. And if you are trying to bring things to you, that essentially is out of range. I will bring you to me to then play a top attack on another card. So I think that if it didn't have that and there was some other conditional crap to the bottom of that, it would make this card way worse. But that bottom is going to carry it until the right time for the top. Otherwise, yes, having infusions that you need to have out in front of you, burn cards are going to be really, they have to be amazing for you to want to play them. Otherwise, you'll exhaust fairly quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, that makes a lot of sense what you said about the bottom and being spammable is that you wouldn't be upset with playing that, every cycle,
Hmm.
even if it's just to generate the wind,
Yep.
right?
That
Gives you a
bottom
little
is
bit
fairly
move.
nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, move two with generate wind is basically good. It's like a standard move, but you get to generate your elements. So yeah, you're right. Like that's a good way of looking at it. And then if the opportunity comes up, then you can play the top. But if you don't play the top, you wouldn't be like, oh, it was a wasted opportunity. I brought this card and didn't get to use it.
Yep.
Because some of those burn cards you see have that, right? Where the top is
Yes.
so good and the bottom is kind of meh, and you bring it for the burn, like for the magical Christmas land of like situations, and then you don't see it and you kind of go like, oh, like I didn't use that card. It was basically like a discard card the
Yeah.
whole time, or I use it as a move two or an attack two. So yeah, good call about the spam ability.
Mm. We have Onyx Shards. This is a very cool card. It goes at a 20, which is lovely. Disarm within range 4, and then you can nerf that to 2 range to make dark. Um, what do you call it? Like on demand disarm is phenomenal. Like to be able to just have a card where there's no elements tied to making it happen. It's just there. It's consistent, and you can do it. So it's actually very 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 cool. Um,
I think it not being an attack as well is really interesting because you get around things like retaliate.
mm,
Right, it also I mean, it's ranged, so that gets around that as well, and it does combine with items as well to, like, increase, kind of its potency, also, it looks like it's enchantable, so it kind of you could
I
turn
didn't
it
notice
into
that. Yeah, it is.
you could chuck in something else on there, I don't know what, but, like, you could chuck something else on there, so you're doing multiple things to something in one go to get
Yeah.
that value, so
Yeah, you could poison with that or wound with that as well, which is actually fairly good. I was just thinking about some of the others, but they will fall off when their disarm falls off, so it's
mm.
kind of dumb.
But the wound is an interesting one because usually when we disarm something, we want to leave it. Like you don't usually disarm something and then like, all right, guys, let's stacks on. So it's kind of like, oh, we'll disarm that one and we'll deal with these ones. And so yeah, you're right. Chucking something like a wound on it. I mean, it's only going to tick a couple of times, but that can be pretty cool to
Well, that
like
will
just
stack
lower it
up
down a
over a
bit.
scenario if I'm using this multiple times, I guess. So yeah.
Mm. And also on your high shield things, you put that on a wind demon, and by the time it gets to have a turn, it's pretty much dead.
Mm. Mm.
So
Sure.
I think wind demons, those type of things with like low HP and high shield. So.
Yep. The bottom of it is a burn card, so it's the second one. Create 4 1 hex obstacles in empty hexes within range 3. All enemies adjacent to at least 2 of the created obstacles suffers 2 damage. And this is kind of like it generates earth or dark as well, and a 1 XP. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, Crag Heart, right? It was reminding me of a Crag Heart from the original Gloomhaven card where it's about creating obstacles nowhere near as consistently, but you're creating them up and doing pure damage to targets. Although you need at least 2 adjacent to each target you're trying to damage. I actually misread this card when I played it that it was going to be doing 4 to the targets because of 2 next to them. But yeah, so I lied to everyone. I was like, I can definitely kill that, and then I didn't, which is
It's
always
all right.
good.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Again, like this is a burn card. So how are you evaluating it? Again, just based on what you've seen here with the cards, like how are you evaluating that in that same like, is this card takeable because the top is good enough for because the bottom's pretty niche, right? Like again, it's situational. You're not always going to need that 2 pure damage or have the space to place the obstacles.
I think the top alone is enough to bring it. I'm playing a bit more of a supporty, tanky kind of frontlining kind of character with it. So therefore this is very good for me. If I was playing more into trying to get Emerald Edge and Boot of the Tempest and all of these kind of DPS kind of things, I probably wouldn't be looking at it that much just because it is a top action, a very good
Mhm.
one, but I think that there are others there that will I'd rather hit ultimately. Whereas for what I'm trying to do with the character, this is great because we've got enough in our party of people who are going to hit and stab stuff. So I'm then trying to take pressure off other people, and if you can disable something that's going to hit for 5 or 6, you're doing that job. The bottom, I mean, I've only tried the one scenario, but I can see the bottom being obviously very good for pure damage on things that are low on health. but there will probably be situations also where that will work very well for mazing, and funneling the monsters to us, whether it be through a dodgy patch or just making sure that they path to me as opposed to running to the back lines and all of that. So yeah, the top at the moment is really good for what I think I think we will need as a group. And it does generate dark. The range 4 is insane. I doubt I'm going to need the range 4.
Mm.
So it's a good dark generator, basically.
That's a good point, actually. Like, there's a good chance you neutering that ability doesn't impact you, where the others are all usually going to, like, negative move, negative heal, negative, like, what was the
Mm,
other one? Um, pull, stuff like that. But this is, you're right, like, range 4 is huge.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's almost too big. If it was range 1, I would be, yeah. If it went from 3 to 1, I'd still probably bring it, but I'd be slightly more disappointed at it.
mm,
So we have rising momentum. So this is an attack 3, and this is a new thing that we're starting to see with some of the Astral cards, is that you get +1 attack for each pair of active infusions. So yeah, the more of the infusions I have out, if I start off with Crest of the Night and Boon of the Tempest, this is going to be attacking for 4. And if I have another 2 out, it's going to be attacking for 5. And the bottom kind of mirrors this, but with movement instead. And they've got a new type of element thing on them where it's more about extending the duration of an existing element. So you need to actually have Earth, and it's most likely going to be waning, and you just stick it back up. And that's very cool for extending the duration of something if you aren't in the right position, I think, to use it now. Um, so yeah, for the movement and also for the attack. Not
yeah.
something I've played around, but that's kind of what I thought about it when I sort of was going through my cards before we actually played.
I mean, looking at the infusions, it looks pretty likely that you're going to have at least 2 out per scenario. So, I mean, that's essentially reads an attack 4 or a move 4, right?
Mm,
Like, even without the elemental stuff, it's still, which if for a level
it's a
1
good
card is
staple.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
At
I
level
think
one, if you had literally at the top attack 4 and bottom was move 4, you'd probably bring it
totally.
on nearly every character.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's the thing when you then include the extra bonuses you're getting, like Caress of the Night, for example, if that's what you're using, it's not just attack 4, it's attack 4, wound, and muddle.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
I
right.
think these are the ways you have to evaluate that as well, right? Like,
Yep.
it's very rarely is it just an attack 4, or it could
No.
be an attack 4 with advantage,
Yeah.
which suddenly now becomes great. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to see how those little buffs and stuff like that make what could be a playing card just, like, actually elevate it up to, like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna
Oh,
get a
so
lot of value
much.
out of this."
It's like
Yeah.
well, Boot of the Tempest. The bottom's now move 5 with jump on a
Oh,
level 1
yeah.
card.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Good point.
Slashing Cyclone. It's an attack 2 targeting all adjacent enemies. And you can nerf that to create air to a 1 attack, which, it's fairly crap. But obviously, if you are needing air, it's very good. You get the XP, but also if you're combining that with the Caress of the Night, you are suddenly wounding and muddling absolutely everything. And that was probably the most obvious and straightforward synergy that I could immediately see with that.
Mm.
Is that as a DPS character or even as a tanky character, if you get into the circle of everything, you can make everything attack you with disadvantage, which is obviously really good. And then obviously if everything's wounded, fantastic. Goes at a 14 as well, which is very nice. Very, very nice. The first teen initiative in the list. The bottom of it is a move 5. All enemies adjacent to any hex you enter during this movement suffer 1 damage. And I think in our original look over that, you were mentioning how it's just a move. So without move of the Boon of the Tempest, enemies adjacent to any hexes, that could be quite difficult to get very effective. But if you have Boon of the Tempest, you are literally jumping over them and you're able to hit more targets more efficiently with it. It's 1 XP and it's a burn, allowing you to also create either air or earth.
Yeah, I think that's the way to look at that, right? Is that if that's a move 6 with jump, do 1 damage to everything you move through, it suddenly is like from a burn card, you're pretty happy with that, right? Like
Mm,
that's your reposition, go anywhere you want and do a bunch of damage on the way through. So yeah, that's cool. The top is interesting because You're right. Like 2 isn't enough for it to really land in the this is a good DPS card. Not
Mm,
without buffs, right? Not without being able to boost that up. Because two is an awkward number I've found. After playing the last couple of characters, I've had like attack 2 is weird because if it's got shields, there's a chance you do nothing, right? You draw a red card in your deck and you've just done no damage. And putting the -1 on it basically is almost guaranteed that you're not going to do anything. I guess the thing is, and we'll look at the AMD later, but you are trying to draw cards to get these elements because they've got cool abilities in there. But it's interesting whether this is actually an offensive card or if it's I won't say defensive card, more of a utility card. Like, because I can see, using that with the top of Caress the Night, of just to go, I'm going to put disadvantage on everything, and now my tanking is great, right?
yeah,
Everything's hitting me. I've got permanent retaliate, and I'm probably not going to take much damage.
yeah. It's a
So
really good point.
it's an interesting card because attack everything next to you seems like a DPS card, but it maybe isn't if you want wind and also like realize you're probably not going to do any damage.
Mm. And you want wind. You want
Yeah.
all the elements. You
Is there
really do.
is there a priority or that you want all of them at once
At the
all the
moment,
time?
it's Earth. I really want Earth, but then everything else, yeah, I still want those because of those wild bits. But I have a rant later.
Okay.
Um, we have Stoic Vigilance. Now, this was a really interesting card the first time I read it and used it. So it goes at a 12, which is nuts. I don't think I've ever oh no, I've had an 11 before. I've had nothing earlier than that. So attack 2, shield 1, it works for the round. Okay, no negatives, no elements, no nothing. Nice and vanilla. This is fine. The bottom is the part that I found interesting. So this was almost a turn 1 card for me in when we played, which is a move 1. All enemies within range 3 that target one of your adjacent allies with an attack this round target you with that attack instead, regardless of the attack's range. And I was kind of reading it as, oh, if anything's going to attack us within range 3, I'm going to take the damage, right? I'm going to take the hit, which is what I was trying to do. And then I read it again and I was like, an adjacent ally. I was like, okay. So it's got to be an adjacent ally, which, is interesting. But then there's another element to it where it's one of your adjacent allies. So if we're getting multi-targeted by something, right, and it's hitting you and someone else, I'm only going to be able to pull it from one of you guys. You know what
Okay.
I mean? So as I was reading more
Mm.
and more into it, and I was just like, okay, so it's not as ridiculous as I thought. Like Berserker's Call, everything just hits me now. There's definitely conditions to it, which makes it a little bit more situational, to getting off, and one that will probably require a little bit more communication if I am to play it.
Yeah. So that's interesting to break that down a little bit more, right? So there's a couple of things. So firstly, the this round. Now this round is the entire round from the start of initiative all the way through next to initiative, right? Not just the individual turn of a monster.
Yes.
Yeah. So that means, and then it's all enemies within range 3 that target 1. So if, let's just say there's someone standing in front of you and they get hit by like 5 enemies and they're all within range 3, they will all hit you, right? Because it's
Yes.
all enemies within range 3 that target one of your allies. Do you pick the ally or is it just the first one that triggers?
I'm not too sure. Whether attack this round, you with that attack instead. So maybe it is just a bit to be based off initiative.
Yeah, okay.
So if yeah, it'll be based off whoever they're automatically going to be hitting first, I would imagine, or
Yeah,
something
okay.
something there.
Yeah,
Mm.
cool. Yeah, it's an interesting pickup because it isn't just a blanket. Anything within range 3 is now hitting me. Like it's
Yeah.
not a range 3 taunt,
Yes.
right? Like it does require a little bit of finessing. Um, but I guess that's where that kind of goes hand in hand with some of the other frontlining kind of characters we've had that have been decent high DPS. And I'll use the example of the Blink Blade just because that's not really spoilers for kind of characters. That's one of those like ones that it can be quite fragile that could go forward, punch a bunch of stuff, and you could just stand behind, right? Or stand next to and just be like, that's fine because I'm going to take all the hits from that.
Yep.
So it's again with the right party makeup, yeah, you're pulling it off one person, right? Not everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or if there's a high priority pet that people are trying to keep alive, it's also very handy.
Yeah, good point, actually. Good point.
Mm. Whether it be a bone shaper one or, who knows. So yeah, Stoic Vigilance. Yeah, we'll see how we go with that. Torrential Cleave. So this is similar to Emerald Edge in that it's got the 2 element costs. So very rigid, and you have to use these two. You do an attack 4, push 2, and it's basically 2 targets adjacent to where you're standing. Non-burn, which, I mean, that's 8 damage on average. And pushing's obviously good if there are hazards or traps around, or you're trying to get things away from you. And yeah, I mean, it's very good, just like Emerald Edge. Very expensive, and yeah, going to be tricky to line up potentially. But I mean, that may come with experience, which I do not have. So from a pure numbers thing, it looks really good, really good. The bottom of it is goes at 83, so also really quite slow. Move 3, you can minus that to make Earth, and then you get to immobilize 2 adjacent enemies. And the initiative allows you to go late, which means you can initiative weave this quite nicely by going towards the end of your turn and then going quickly at the start of the next turn, making sure that's very good for closing the distance on ranged enemies who will want to move away, thus giving them disadvantage.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
have not
cool.
played around with it yet, but after the first scenario, I'm probably going to be brigging this because yeah, reasons.
For Earth reasons. So this might be a stupid question, but the requirement to play this card, so the wind and the grass at the top,
Mm.
that is only for if you want to do the top action, correct? Like the bottom action does not require that.
No, that's the top action.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So it's unique for that because that was a bit weird if
Oh,
you
that would be
needed to
rough.
spend. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. So okay. Cool. Cool. No, that makes sense because that's the other one as well where the Emerald Edge the requirement, but the heal it doesn't have a requirement. So I guess it's interesting with those cards that have this requirement, which we haven't really seen before. We've seen cards that might be like, attack 3, eat a grass, and then it becomes attack 4 and do a bunch of stuff. But without an element, it still does something.
Yeah.
Like the top of that card does not do anything if you do not have those
It,
those two
it
up.
it doesn't have an ability. It becomes a
Yeah.
default attack too. Like if
Yeah.
something goes earlier and it's a bloody imp or something and it eats the element, this card is absolutely useless.
Yeah.
Um, which
So,
is
but I mean, the
super
good thing
risky.
is having the other half of it. It's kind of like a burn card that you don't want to use, right? Unless it's in the right situation. At least the bottom has a use. So if you're looking
Yes.
at going like move 3 or essentially move 2, create grass, and then potentially immobilize stuff, as long as again that's spammable and usable in most situations, you're kind of okay with bringing the card, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We have Unstoppable Impulse. This is the last level 1 card. So attack 4. You can make an attack 3 to create dark. I think it rounds out the rest of our tops quite nicely. Where it's it's a nice little unrestricted attack 4 on a level
How do
1
you
card.
feel about that initiative?
I think that is probably a terrible initiative, and like it's so bad. You can't
50s,
plan
that's gotta
around
be, like, the
those.
worst, right? Like,
It's
you
got to be
can't
one
do
of the
anything with
worst.
that.
No,
You gotta this
it's literally a coin flip of where you're gonna go. We've seen times where people play like a 24 and they end up going last or second last. It's just I'm gonna say this is gonna go last, but if I'm predicting that and I'm playing this to go last, it's gonna go like second. And all the
Yeah.
creatures are gonna pull their real hard hitting late cards. Yeah.
Well, that's it. This will go last against anything that you want to hit before it has a turn and before anything that you want to have a turn first. Like, it's
Mm.
the worst.
Mm-hmm. The bottom of this is another dual cost element one. It's a push 2 range 1, and then you can move, and then push 2 range 1, and then you can move 2, creating an XP. And unlike the other ones, I feel like if you fluff this one because you missed the element, it's not as bad. I think a top action being spent on an attack 2 is like, it just feels worse than
Yeah.
a bottom being used as a move 2.
Yeah, that's yeah, good call actually. Because like the torrential cleave, which is attack 4, hit 2 targets, or emerald edge, which is attack 5 and get ward, right, are both really good. Converting them down to attack 2, nothing, is you're essentially losing 2 or 3 attack and a ward and or a push. Whereas at this one, you're right, you're turning it from a move to like ignoring the push, which is obviously good. But ignoring the push, you can at least get like move 2.
Mm.
I guess the added bonus to something like this is with Boon of the Tempest, right? Because
Mm.
you're getting +1 and jump to all. So that actually then ends up reading push 1, jump, move 3 with jump, push 1, move 3 with jump.
Yeah,
Which I mean, it's not sorry, it's not fixing the problem if you don't have the elements for it, but it's making it even better if you do play it.
yeah, it's weird because I just kind of, if you have a top card that pulls or pushes or whatever, you can literally push the same target through the same hex hazard terrain tile twice, which I've only just thought of, because your movement will be further, so you can jump ahead of it after you've already pushed him through a hazardous terrain and then push him straight back through it again, which is very good.
Oh, so like if you're next to it and it's next to a hazardous
Yeah,
terrain, you could like push it into it, jump over it, and push it back over.
correct. Yeah,
That's hilarious. Yeah, and end up in a completely different spot or back where you were.
yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I like it.
So our X cards, we have Battle Prowess. Grant one of your summons or yourself attack 3, and you can recycle or re-wane or re-whatever the dark element. We read this obviously before we saw any summons or anything like that, so it was like, oh, this could be interesting as to what it will grant later. But yeah, very
Mm,
self-explanatory, that one. That one also is handy because it does say allow you to grant yourself. So in case any
true.
situation where something dies, you can still make use of it, provided you've got something to hit ultimately. But it's a nice
Yeah,
fail
okay.
safe.
Yep, that makes sense.
Goes to the initiative 78. And yeah, move 2 down the bottom. Move 2, you can nerf it to move 1, create any element you want, and an XP, and then loot 2. And this is one of the few, it's a burn obviously, one of the few loot 2 cards that I think I've seen in the whole game. I like this card. I
Yeah.
like it.
So yeah,
Yeah, I do. I definitely like it.
it's got a weird spot, right? Because creating one of any element seems like something that you want to
It's
do as
so
early as
good,
possible, right? Like this is fix any problem you have.
but not for a
But
burn.
it's not a burn, and especially not early when you are there's not enough loot around. Like this is one of those last phase kind of last few turns. There's just loot everywhere because we're going for an objective. You go, all right, well, I'll do a loot too. Even if you don't create the element, you get a move to, and you just kind of just vacuum up everything.
Mm,
Which is great because we're traditionally really shit at looting in our party. So having someone who's going to be able to pick it all up, right, is handy. Like it's kind of like a space that we have a gap for.
mm-hmm.
So
The following one is Crystalline Aegis or Aegis. It's a brittle. So we have a brittle targeting, range 1. And you can add a target for each pair of active infusions that you have out, which can be pretty spicy. You can get usually
crazy.
expect to get 2 brittles out, or in some cases 3. It's non-conditional, which is awesome, and you get an XP from it. And it's paired with a 17. And the bottom is amazing because it's a regen ward self. Uh, I like this card a lot. I definitely took it
Mm.
with me. The brittle is obviously very handy for obvious reasons, and the bottom was also handy for just keeping myself up, I guess. So yeah, I don't really have a lot to report on that, but it's a really good card. I like it.
It does seem great, and we haven't seen much brittle at all in our playthrough, and we've seen almost every character. So like it's not regular, easy to do, right? We've seen characters that have done it, but there's been hoops to jump through in order to. I think the on a stick is great. The extra target one's interesting because I wonder how often it's something that you'll make use of. Like, I mean, not that you'll never be next to 2 things, but I feel like, once each cycle, trying to brittle 2 things. I mean, I suppose it's fine because it's always going to be value, right? Like, eventually they're going to take damage. It's not something that just drops off after a turn.
No.
Uh, Whereas at the target 1 almost seems like a targeted ability. You're like, all right, hey, guys, has anyone got a big hit coming up because I can brittle something? Or is it then it's like, hey, anyone got a big hit? I can brittle something. Yeah, good. And I'm just going to brittle something else as well. Like,
Mm,
it's almost like a little, like a bonus, like,
yeah.
it's like a bonus brittle. So, yeah, it's just a weird spot, but it seems great. Like, it seems like a really good card. And
No.
almost seems like you're not going to know which one you want to play. Like, both the top and the bottom seem value town.
It all depends on how much I'm getting my ass kicked and how much something at the end has really high shield or some stupid thing that none of us seem to be efficient in dealing with.
Mm,
Um, but then, yeah, the risk is a wound will eat the brittle or something like that.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
What's cool as well about the kind of design with a card like this is that again the top can be super offensive. Like as in useful for yeah, like I said, burning down a big target, something with a lot of shields. But the bottom comes in when, say, we're clearing out a room and we've got one or two monsters left, and we're like, oh, we're all going to rest next turn, or we've got to go open a door. And where you get those 2 or 3 turns where nothing happens, like this is a good card to have there to be like, great, well, I'm going to chuck a ward on myself, and I'm going to get 2 or 3 ticks of regen,
Yep.
and then potentially like we go in, and then you're going in a bit more health, with ward. Like it works really well for that. Like I don't know, deep breath turn. Like, all
Yes.
right, cool. I'm not going to get hit, and it's all good. And I think you might have had one situation in the last one where you managed to negate the damage down so much that your ward halved it to 0, and then you didn't lose your regen.
Mm.
So playing with regen and having ward and shields and stuff is really cool because you can have these moments where it's exciting to see if you can get the damage down to 0 and hold on to your regen.
Yes.
Like, I remember playing that with one of my other characters and, being surrounded by monsters, but having so much shield and disadvantage that I'm like getting through a whole round of attacks, getting attacked and going like, I've still got my regen. Like, this
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah.
So that can be
It
its own
feels.
little fun game.
Yeah. Yes. Getting hit a lot and losing health a lot and trying to get that back up is a really fun game.
No, they're getting hit a lot and
I
not
know.
taking any damage, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost
I
it's
don't
the
know how to
badge
do
of
that.
honor of like, I've got this thing that if I don't take any damage, I get to keep it. And it's like, wow, I got attacked by 5 things and still have my regen.
Yeah, but I don't have a mastery attached to that, like, which means that my character probably can't pull that off like a certain other character that maybe you have played. And then we have Imbue with Life. So this is the last X card. It's a single element consumer. This is our summon, the animated Claymore. And it's got 2 health, it moves 3, it attacks for 3. Move 3, attack 3 pets are great, we love them. 2 health is very, very low. And it's got 1 shield, which obviously makes up, a little bit of ground, but not when you're running around, I guess, at minimum difficulty 3. It's got a big caveat with an exclamation mark that is mandatory. Whenever you do not have disarm, you gain disarm. So this is your sword that you've now thrown out, and it's got a mind of its own, and it's got to start running around, but you can no longer attack. And I don't believe there's any way around that I know of. But this summon is affected by all of your active infusions, and that means if you have Boon of the Tempest, it will have +1 to move and jump. Caress of the Night, it will be wounding and muddling on its attacks, etc., etc. This is one of the coolest cards I think I've ever seen in the game, where it is just kind of gone everything, and the fact that it saved it to the last X card for our unboxing, we're going through it, has just gone, hey, everything you've basically learned about this class, here's something to turn everything on its head and just completely open your mind to a completely almost different class. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something that I've definitely been like, hey, I want to try and make this a thing.
I was gonna say exactly the same thing. Like, this is gonna be one of my favorite design cards in all of Frosthaven, right?
Mm,
Like, I think I love not just what this has done from a summons perspective, because summons have been something in Gloomhaven that were very hit and miss. We've seen some cool ideas in Frosthaven with other classes on how summons work to make them a bit more viable, but a bit more interesting. And this is another one that just went to a level that I didn't even think of, right? And I think the way that this works in with a character that can be very defensive, and it just seems really cool. The only thing that's weird is that it's an animated claymore that walks along the ground,
mm. Yeah,
which I
it's not
think
floating.
we kind of came to. It's like, oh, it goes over there. He's like, it doesn't have jump or fly. I'm like, oh, you're like, yeah. So it just kind of bounces along the ground at the
Yeah.
monsters. But other than the theme on that, yeah, it just seems so cool to have this option. And I think
It's
in
also one of
addition,
the few pets that are resummonable, right? It's not a loss, which is obviously key. Because if it was a loss, that would just defeat the whole purpose of doing it, right?
yeah, yeah, I think that's it. Even without contemplating the power and what you can do with it that way, I think just the decision points it adds for you as well are interesting. Like thinking about this idea of like, well, you don't really want to summon it turn one because I mean, then you're probably going to struggle. You can't do any attacks, which could be okay if you're full defensive, but you want to leave that open. So maybe if you're summoning it in your first kind of cycle, it's then going like, well, what if it's still alive in my next cycle? Then I can't attack. So there's almost a playing around that. Like
Yeah.
I like that idea of like, well, I might get some attacks out early, and then I'll summon it when I don't really need to attack, and then it's probably going to die, and then I'll kind of cycle back through that way. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. I love it.
Yep. And when you jump back up, you can see now with cards like Crystalline Aegis, which is the brittle one, or the disarm one, they're not attacks. So they're the reasons why you'd bring some of these, because all of a sudden, once this is out, the attack cards for you become useless, right? You've got the battle prowess, which is grant one of your summons, which allows it to hit twice in a round, etc. So yeah, it shows you immediately now. It makes sense that there is a build around this card.
Actually, that's a really good point. I didn't think of that. If you do battle prowess and just use it as an attack, you're getting one attack. But if you use it for your sword, you're getting two attacks.
Yeah,
That's that's so good.
yeah. Oh, that's great. We love that.
Yeah. Okay.
The bottom of it is a heal 7. It's a burn card. So obviously heal 7 is nuts, but what's the kicker here? Well, you can reduce that healing by 2 for each element you want to create from our available element synergy pool, to get a little bit of XP. So you can chip it down. It's obviously very good for burst healing, but you then lose the sword. It's kind of, I don't really rate it, but it's handy to have it because it's going to be with me regardless, because I'm
Mm.
picking it for the top. That it's a little too, like, it's guaranteed 2 XP at the end of the scenario ultimately, because the requirements you 100% meet. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, it does have a weird spot, right? Like, it kind of seems one of those, all right, I think we've got this scenario. We're going into the last room. Does everyone else have enough damage to win this? If so, I'm going to pump myself back up and just go full defensive to just draw the aggro so everyone else can clear.
Mm.
I won't have my pet out, but 7 healing's massive. So, yeah, it is interesting. Is there any chance you burn at turn one just to create all your elements so you can just
Yeah,
go like
totally.
party town next
100%.
turn?
Yeah, of course. I might try that
Yeah,
next time. We'll see what
yeah,
happens.
yeah. Cool, cool.
All right. So at level 2, we get remote impact. It's a formation one. It's got a gap in it, which is a little bit weird. Attack 3, you can nerf it, do some pushing, create some air, and 1 XP. Yeah, it's fine. 72 as an initiative. It's a double again, so really hard to use, and then create a 1 hex obstacle and an empty hex within range 5, which is pretty good. And then you get to immobilize all the enemies adjacent to the created obstacle. I don't rate this card very much, only because of my playstyle that I'm intending to go with it.
I was gonna
I'm
say
playing.
your energy there. I couldn't read whether you were excited about this card or not.
No, and I'm almost certain like 3 targets is pretty good. And the bottom is super situational, but I can see the top working with all the extra crap that you have. But I'm not really playing into that, so yeah, it just didn't excite me. I was more looking for anything that was going to go with a more defensive kind of play style, which
Yeah,
luckily enough, the next card, Veil of Protection, has. Which the top is great. It's a heal 5 at range 3, and can heal anyone, but I mean, no. -2 healing to create Earth. I mean, nice. We like that. Kombucha face. And XP. But the bottom brings us finally another infusion. And this one is your current and maximum hit point values are increased by 3, and you are immune to curse. And this works on our sword friend. So our sword will now have 5 health, and becomes all of a sudden much easier to keep alive.
mm,
And obviously more health for you is obviously good. The curse thing is like probably not going to come into play much, but there are obviously a few mobs that deal with that. And then what's cool about this also is every time you play another infusion and this one, you get to ward yourself,
yep.
which, yeah.
I think the curse thing's a interesting little kind of niche buff in that I know we've had a character of yours before that really just wanted to absorb all the curses, or all the status effects in general. But I know we used them to stack the curses on you,
Yep.
and we've kind of done this before with other scenarios. Like this is an interesting one where we do have a curse monster like a imp, like a whatever imp it is that curses, to make sure you are the primary target.
Mm.
Just absorbing all of those, which is a fairly big buff because, yeah, they can make a difference.
I
Th-
agree. I think it's the forest imps and all of that that I would be like, no, just let me go forward and just take all of these because, yeah.
yeah. The other thing that's interesting with you mentioned once you buff the sword's health is that the bottom of Emerald Edge, which is the heal targeting two,
Mm.
right, suddenly now becomes more interesting because you are like one shield and five health. There's a good chance it survives one or two hits. So chucking two heal into it, right, again becomes really cool.
To top it off, yeah.
Yeah, to
Uh,
keep it going, right? Like.
yeah. Level 3, we get Guide the Flow and Reinforced Riposte. Or Riposte. Guide the Flow is it's a unique card where it's a move 3 at the top. So it's a top move and a bottom attack at a 35. That's already very cool for many reasons because of the, room is clear. Let's move to the next one. It's a move with another bottom move, which is pretty nuts. And then, of course, the same deal can be said for the attack at the bottom. It allows you to attack multiple times. The element exchange, when I first read it, was kind of like really confusing and I didn't really, quite get there. I 100% see it now in that that's actually very, very handy for just going, oh, I just need earth. Oh, and we keep I keep making the other ones. Now I can literally turn it into something else with either the top or the bottom, and sort of just alter the element chart ultimately, and prep myself and fix it for the following turn, which is really cool. But the second one, reinforced riposte, is a retaliate 1 range 2. And you can add an extra retaliate for each pair of active infusions. So we've now got a retaliate buff that gets better the more infusions you have out. It's got a dark recycler, goes at an 18, and the bottom is a move 2, wound 1 with range 1, and then move 2. Goes at a great initiative. Obviously, if you're playing a more defensive style, you will want this, and I have chosen this. And so far, I struggled a little bit to get the top. The top was just, again, I'll go into a rant about that later on in an episode. But the bottom was more what I was using this card for, as it's essentially a move 4 and wounding something, and obviously the initiative's very good. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was good.
One thing I do like about that, this card here with the retaliate 1 range 2, and also the infusion that I think you have for Bounty of Earth, which also is the same, right? So you're essentially getting probably be a 3 by the time you have 2 of them up.
Mhm.
Uh, I like that it's got range 2 because it has that extra bonus of if you get pushed away. Like
Yeah,
that's frustrating with some monsters that they push you and then they don't get the retaliate. So it
yeah,
kind of, again, it's very niche, but it does protect that for you. Like going like, no, I'm still getting it off. And
absolutely.
also, yeah, it means that you can kind of, again, using that card where they focus on you, you can do that from afar,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Like your positioning. So yeah,
Positioning is important. You want to be within range 2 of, I guess, most ranged units, which they're dumb. They don't move further away.
yeah.
So you just play into it.
But I mean, even with melee, like if something's in melee with me, you can stand behind me. You can take my hits with
Correct.
that card,
Yeah.
and then you can still retaliate back. So it doesn't become this like, oh well, I've got this card that lets me take hits, but then I don't get any benefit out of it. Like you're able to stack all these benefits of being focused, right, between the retaliate and taking the hits, and another card that we're gonna have a look at later. So there is a good reason to focus on you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And at level 4, we got Coalescing Darkness. So it's our, I don't know, 5th or 6th infusion. After an adjacent enemy attacks you, that enemy gains Curse. I definitely picked this because of the playstyle I was playing. What I didn't read until I played it was an adjacent enemy. I thought it was all attacks, which obviously is a bit stupid. But if it's an adjacent enemy, then I will be able to curse them, which is very cool. And obviously, if I have my sword out, it will be the same deal with my sword. Every time it gets attacked by an adjacent enemy. And then when this infusion or another is played, perform disarm disarm range 1, which is great. And that again plays into what we said at the start. Whenever I play another infusion, I would like to be standing next to something else so that I can at least get this disarm off. It's all of that planning ahead and making sure you know with the elements and lining it up at the right time. It's its own headache, and it's an exciting puzzle.
I think the top of this one with the infusion ability is interesting and kind of can play into a turn 2 if you can't get it turn 1 play in that, disarming something is always good. So, like, moving someone you don't want to move forward and attack. Like, we've got these ones that you really need to be next to someone or damaged or something like that in order to make use of the text on the infusion ability. Whereas this is a throw a disarm out, that it will always be useful unless you're throwing out something that's about to die, which is also pretty rare turn 2. So, yeah, it kind of is a good one early because, again, you want as many curses going in their deck. So it kind of floats into the go forward on turn 1, get your elements ready, and then, throw a disarm out while you get the rest of your defensive stuff going. At
Yes.
least it's like less damage kind of coming at you.
Yes. Finally, we have Desperate Throw. This is an attack 5, targeting one enemy within 4 hexes. And you can make it an attack 4 instead by making Earth. And then you have to disarm yourself. Now, this is a melee attack. It is not a ranged attack, which is interesting. The other thing about this, and I've learned from the last scenario, because I immediately picked Coalescing Darkness because of the, tanking and getting attacked and all of that. I overlooked this card completely until I went through my deck multiple times once we were done. This has a great way to generate Earth on a top action as well, which I don't really have. So I'm eyeing this at the moment without, obviously, we're looking ahead and looking at what's coming. We'll see where we go regarding, other options for Earth generation. Because Earth is how do you get the sword out. And that's why. And a lot of turns that I played, I didn't have anything to create Earth properly to then play the sword. So then I was playing other things, which then, it was a real interesting challenge to be faced with, as to get reliable Earth to get sword out when it went down.
Yep.
16 initiative, obviously is super fast. We like that. And then the bottom is a move to loot 1, and you can move any element from the waning part to the strong part of its column, which is also quite nice. So,
the throw part of that and I think lines up with the theme component of the animating your sword. I love the idea that you're just like,
because you're disarmed.
yeah, you're throwing your sword and you're like, so.
Yes.
And I mean, look, again, like that also works with the again keeping the theme going, and that desperate throw, you disarm yourself because you're giving yourself disarm on your turn. I mean, you get to do the attack first, which makes sense, right? But you'll be disarmed next turn. You summon your sword, right?
Yeah.
So like that kind of combo of like throwing it and then just summoning it thematically seems cool, but also it makes sense because you don't have to worry about that next turn of disarm. So
yeah, and if you scroll up, like if I wanted to create Earth, like Veil of Protection, I'm probably going to be using for the bottom for the sword buff, so I'm not using that top heal. And this is what I learned while I was playing it. I was like, where are all these cards that are going to generate this? Torrential Cleave, the bottom, I didn't bring. So I was like, okay, there's not that. Rising Momentum is only rehashing it if it's out. The bottom of Emerald Edge was one of the few ways I was doing it. But sometimes just timing and all of that, I wasn't getting it out. And then the top of Bounty of the Earth, well, we explained that, it just becomes a shield 1, right? So if you're willing to sack a whole turn for the future to get it out and play sort of defensively, if you compare those with the card we just read, it's almost like you want that one over it.
It's really tricky, you're right. Like because even Bounty of the Earth, if you're going defensive build, that you want the infusion from that, right? The Retaliate one is how you kind of get that Retaliate game going. So the only real option you have is the bottom of Emerald Edge, which is not something you want to be playing on turn 1.
No. Well, Torrential Cleave is the other one because at least there's a move tied to it. So, because I looked at it and I was like, well, I'm not bringing that.
That means
Yes.
you have to, yeah, you're gonna want. That means you're gonna want to take it. Which again, I mean, it's not terrible, but yeah, it is interesting that you do kind of have a good combo there with Desperate Throw and the sword. And range like 4 hexes way again. We just talked about how far range 4 is. Turn 1, that's super easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
So
okay.
I'll have to assess when it gets level 5 and work out what we do there. So yes, they're the cards. Over the perks. So we've got, and this is what I found rather fascinating. We've got a lot of element-based AMD cards, which is obviously really cool because it'll help. It's definitely taking on a more RNG approach, which is why Advantage is really good because you get to draw more and choose which one you want. I didn't read the very first one correctly, even though I did select it. Replace the -2 card with 1/1, and it creates all 3 elements as opposed to a choice. You guys brought that up when I played it, and I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I just choose one. And they're like, no, it's all 3. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So that's when you hit the jackpot. You get all 3, which is fantastic. The rest of them obviously are split up into choices, but none of them are adding your big hitting stuff, which is what I'm used to in the past, which also reinforces that I want to play a bit more supporter utility based. And then interestingly enough, there's I spoke to Dwarf about, or he mentioned in our thing that he's actually, there's not a house rule change to one of the perks here, which is see the ones that say replace 1+0 card with 3 move 1 waning element to strong rolling modifier. It's in the middle. So you're replacing 1 +0, and you're adding 3 of these other cards in that will basically move 1 waiting element to strong. I don't understand the idea behind why, but I can sort of piece together why I think that makes sense. Is that it's almost like how many elements are going to be in that position to make this useful, and you're adding 3 of them, and there's 2 perks, which means you're adding 6 of them. So they've essentially house ruled it. This was apparently supposed to be a thing that it's meant to be plus, get a Sharpie and write down, instead of the +0, you're gonna, sorry, on the rolling card, you add a +1. So it adds +1 to your attack. It's still rolling, and it's move 1 waning element to strong.
Yeah, okay. So it buffs the damage slightly. Yeah, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I see that because the move 1 waning element to strong rolling, basically with +0, basically the likelihood that that's going to be like super good all the time is not. Like creating an element is usually always good because it
Yeah.
lasts 2 turns, but moving it from waning to could a lot of the time just do nothing.
Yes.
So it's a pretty big investment for what essentially could be no effect.
Yes.
Um,
The other one that I found really interesting is the ignore item minus effects. This allows you to obviously wield a lot of heavier armor, more defensive armor, which do have the -1 penalty, so you get to ignore it. But also, whenever you become exhausted, you keep all your active bonuses in play, and your summons acting on initiative 99 each round. So you die, but your sword keeps living on, and very cool.
I love it.
I don't read it fully like a burn bright and just die fast kind of thing. I see it more as a look, I'm finally going to exhaust, but I've still potentially got some use left.
Yeah. Well, there is a world where you have on your final turn or two a infused card that you haven't used, and you just throw it down as you exhaust, so that your sword gets a little bit more bonuses, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just it's a cool way of going like, oh, you're dead, but you get to keep playing. Like, and what I think will be cool when we do this is that there will also be an element of like, well, we got to protect Detty's sword. We didn't want to protect him because he was tanking, but now all it's left is this floating sword. So we've got to do what we can to make sure it doesn't die,
Yeah.
so that you kind of don't get eliminated.
Mm.
Which I think will be another fun little game.
It's fun. It's great because I can literally walk away. I don't control it.
Oh, it's
It's
just
it's an
AoE. So
AI.
you, okay, AI. So you don't really care. Yeah,
No,
yeah, sure.
but
I was
I'm
more
wondering
thinking you
if
get
there's
to
a
keep playing, and you're like, I get to go home early and go to bed. Yeah.
yeah. I'm wondering if there's a world where you can bring as many infusion cards as possible, because obviously that's what's going to lead to an early exhaustion. And you have
Mhm.
like 7 out, and then you're like, well, I've got these 3, 4 cards left, which will buy me another couple of turns, and now I'm gone. But hey, look at this sword. Look what I can do. It's
Yep.
jumping all over the place. Whenever you short rest, you may eat up an element, any element, to recover 1 spent hand item or double hand item, which
That's cool.
it is. Ah, Yeah, it is. It's a bit restrictive because it's only a hand item, but then it could be busted if it was something else, I guess.
I think without spoilers, I think there are items that generate elements with hands.
I haven't seen any.
Oh, maybe there isn't then. I thought there
Oh, there
was.
might be.
I thought there was something that did that, which could be something you could look at. So, yeah, your short rests. The problem with this is that you've got a good ignore item effects
Mm,
one, which usually, I mean, means you can wear some of the better armor
mm-hmm.
mostly, which refreshes on a long rest. So you're getting value town out of that. But then you also have this refresh on a short rest one. So
Yeah.
you kind of get torn. Like I've got this on my character where I have bonuses either way, but I've played characters before that got really big bonuses for long resting and there was nothing for short resting. So you're almost incentivized only to long rest. And it kind of just became part of playing the characters. Like I always long rest because I get all of this cool stuff back. Whereas you're kind of torn a little bit. It'll be depending on where you're at with your current items. But yeah,
Mm.
that's kind of an interesting decision point. So,
Yeah, I haven't chosen that one yet. I will work out if I can make it a priority or not. The bottom one, once each scenario during ordering of initiative, after all ability cards have been revealed, I can create any element. It's only once per scenario, which at first I was like, oh, that's a bit shit. But first turn, it's a way of getting an element up in round one when you normally couldn't, and you're
mm,
infusing them. So yeah, it actually is very good. And if you don't need it round one, it's always handy to have as a backup.
yeah,
Mastery wise, have 5 active fusion bonuses. I think this is going to be very easy. It's literally a scenario I'm going to go into, and I'm focusing more so on getting 5 out because obviously
mhm,
that's fairly expensive and hard to organize from elements, but ultimately it seems really easy to do. Um, and you potentially book your effectiveness for that scenario, so you're literally going for that mastery and doing your best with what you have. And the second one, kill at least 4 enemies, but never attack. I think that's quite obviously used with either retaliating or your sword,
yeah.
which, I mean, or both.
Compared to a lot of the other ones we've seen, I think those two are like one of them's easy from the perspective that you're probably going to book your scenario, but you won't be completely useless. You'll still be doing things, but you do got to pick the right scenario. You do have to pick the right scenario. The other one seems easy enough, but that kind of is one that you just fall into by accident. Like we talk about these accidental masteries all the time, where you can achieve half of it without realizing, and then go, "Oh, I can probably do this now."
Yeah.
Like if you do your first 2 or 3 turns and maybe you kill 2 things with retaliate, suddenly you're like, "Oh, hang on. This is actually on the cards."
Well, in the first scenario we did, Phil was like, "What are you gonna do?" And I was like, I don't know." And I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm just gonna stay here." He goes, "Okay, cool." And he's gonna kill the 2 things next to me, and then my sword killed both.
Yeah.
Because of the challenge card that we had at the time. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
And then on my sheet, I was like, "Oh, that's 2." And I haven't like attacked yet. And then later on, I did. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but cool. It's a great class. I'm loving it. It's definitely given me a whole different idea of playing it and play style, and it's very, very intriguing. And I'm looking forward to this whole new challenge that's not built around hazardous terrain and not built around pushing and pulling and force movement and things like that. Yeah.
The thing I'm looking forward to for you playing this is that it's gonna put you into a place and a play style you don't usually play as
Mm,
much, but I think it's still within the realms of, play style, and that's more of like what you need to manipulate to make it effective, that you are comfortable with. Like, I think you are good at managing that element and seeing the combos of those cards because you've done it with a couple of the other characters you've played before, but you're gonna be putting that into play to play a more, I won't say supportive, but more defensive and control-y type character, which is interesting because so I think you're gonna get some cool things out of it. Uh, and you're gonna get to lean into probably some things that you have shown that you're good at. So it's
mm,
a bit different. It's kind of like turning that into, yeah, a different play style, which is it's just gonna be interesting to see.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And then right now, enjoy the bloopers. from the first lot. I'll cut a couple in here, and then you can listen to what we did say with some of the
Uh,
stuff.
Crap. All right, cool. Yeah. So rip my inbox, I guess,
Yeah,
as they say.
that's right. So yeah, thanks for joining us for another unboxing, and we look forward to the last one we have left.
Thanks a lot. Tell us how wrong we were again. Hopefully less wrong than the first time. All right.
Hopefully.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye. In which case you get that infusion bonus because it's +1 and jump to all your move abilities.
Oh, so that's
Hey,
just permanent. I don't even have to do that anymore.
I think you have to do it every time you want the
Okay.
infusion ability. Yeah, I'm sure we're
Um,
getting it completely wrong now, and someone will correct us and
100%.
figure it out
Yeah,
by the end. Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. And it's just a
Okay.
bit more health and
Yeah,
shieldy.
I see what's going on here. Okay.
Is the top permanent?
The top is no, the top is a round.
Oh, okay.
The bottom
No,
is a
no, no. Sorry,
permanent.
sorry, sorry. I mean, the infusion top, the window bit. Is that
Mhm.
permanent?
No, that
Oh,
would
why
just be for
not?
the round.
Okay.
Yeah. So what it looks like is that, and this is just from these 2 cards, but looking at the next one as well. So that was Bounty of Earth, yeah? Bounty
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
Earth?
yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like you play it as a persistent. So ignore the infusion for now. You play as a persistent.